This yin yoga sequence emphasizes internal rotation of the hips and a few forward folds. So the postures will include half frog, half shoelace, half saddle, and a prone twist. 3 topics will be briefly introduced. The first one is a concept known as antifragility. The second one will be the theory of exercise, and the third one will be human variation. So gather up some props, maybe some pillows and some blankets might be handy, and remember your personal intention for practice. So this practice will begin by finding a comfortable seated position. You can sit cross-legged like I am, and if that's slightly uncomfortable, sit up on a little bit of height. If it's still really uncomfortable, then maybe try to sit another way. We'll do a little bit of breathing here before we get started into the yin postures. So we'll try a modified form of what's known as alternate nostril breathing here. So first get settled, feel rooted and stable in your lower body. Maybe grow your spine long so you have a nice long neutral spine. You can help this out by rolling your shoulders up and back to open up through the fronts of the collarbones here. And then maybe slightly tuck your chin to lengthen the back of your neck so the crown of your head is actually trying to point up towards the ceiling. This just helps to make everything easier to breathe here. And then take your hands, place them on your lap, on your thighs, palms face up, and for a couple of breaths, just notice your normal natural breath. After that, maybe begin to deepen your breath. You deepen it by lengthening the duration of each inhale and exhale. If it's accessible to you, maybe seal your lips and just breathe through your nose. Now, if you have a stuffy nose, it's better to breathe through your mouth. But if you can breathe through your nostrils, see if you can try that. And just notice how all of that feels to you, to your torso. And we'll start off with what I call a few centralized breaths here. So you're noticing the entire feeling up of your torso on each inhale. And you're noticing how everything relaxes and releases on each exhale. So maybe one more of these. And you can continue with this if you're liking this kind of breathing. Otherwise, if you want a little bit more complication here to cultivate mental focus, then after your next exhale, close your left hand, keep your right hand open, and for maybe a couple of breaths, shift your mental visualization over onto your right side and just visualize yourself just breathing more into the right side, down through your right side of your nose, into your right lung. So as you inhale, you're more aware of how your right side is filling up, and as you exhale, it softens and it releases. You're breathing through both sides, but just for sake of argument, just for mental focus, you're emphasizing the right side here. So after your next exhale, close the right hand, open the left. Same procedure now. Now you're just shifting your focus over onto the left side. So when you inhale, you're feeling that left side expand, maybe your rib cage opens, and then as you exhale, it softens here for 1 or 2 more breaths here. And then we'll begin to alternate every breath. So after your next exhale, close the left hand, open the right. 1 breath here with the mental visualization on the right side, and then close the right, open the left. 1 breath here with emphasis on the left side. And then once you get kind of the gist of this, then you will continue at your own pace for several more breaths, anywhere from 2 to 5 more, depending on how fast you're going here. And just notice. Just take stock of the side that you're paying attention to. Maybe one more cycle. Now we started on the right, so we want to end on the left. So one more right breath. One more complete left breath. Then open up both hands and bring your mental visualization back to center and feel your whole torso for a couple of breaths here. And then after your next exhale, if your eyes happen to be closed, you can open your eyes. We'll start the Yin sequence, but before that, one warm-up pose, and it'll be bound angle pose. So if your legs are not already out in front, extend your legs out in front in kind of a sitting position here, and then bend both knees, put the bottoms of your feet together, lower your knees out to either side, and then bring your heels in as close to your hips as accessible for you here. So you can begin this posture with your hands behind your hips here, root them into the ground, and then use your arms to extend your whole spine long here. And just notice if there's a lot of pressure here already. Notice where it is, and let it maybe be pressureful but not painful here. Some of you might want to bring your hands in front, maybe clasp your feet. This is maybe a more recognizable pose here. And for those of you who need a little bit of motion in your yang work here, you can always kind of bob your knees gently up and down like you're flapping butterfly wings here. So just a couple more breaths here. So muscles are lightly toning here. This is not a yin posture. We're treating this as a yang posture here. And then slowly soften, release, bring your legs up, extend them forward. We will actually get into the first long-held yin posture. The first one we'll hold for several minutes. This posture is known as half frog, and it's an internal rotation of the hip socket, which I mentioned earlier here. So again, if sitting with your legs out in front creates a lot of strain in the bottoms of your legs or in the backside of your body, sit up on some height. I'm already sitting up on 2 blankets myself here. And then for half frog, you'll bend the left knee, bring the left heel back alongside the left hip. You can bring this left knee out wide. You can put padding under that left foot if it needs padding. And it doesn't matter what the orientation of the foot is. The most comfortable orientation is where you want the foot here. And then you extend the right leg out long. This might cause a lot of strain. If it is, you can keep a small bend in the right leg I've got a blanket roll here, by placing a blanket roll. Soft blanket roll underneath that right leg here. So this is the beginnings of half frog. If you're feeling lots of intensity here, but it's not painful, then you can stay here. If it is painful and you're wanting to know what you can do instead, you can do half butterfly. So half butterfly is a completely different posture. You'll bring this leg forward, bend the left knee, bring the heel on the inside of the hip. This is an externally rotated hip now. So the emphasis is different, but maybe this feels better, maybe this is more appropriate for your practice. So you can always do this if half frog isn't working for you. If half frog is working for you, then maybe grow up tall through your torso if you want to fold forward. Maybe turn towards the right leg. And then initially with a long spine, hinge forward from your hip socket so that your top of your pelvic bone tips forward slightly. And then relax the rest of your torso and round your torso as much as it goes until it stops here. So this is half frog. This is where we'll stay for a few minutes. So this is the first yin posture. I'll go through and I'll remind us of the mechanics, the principles of a yin yoga practice. So the fundamental underlying concept of yin is we're trying to relax muscle fiber so that the traction can go into the connective tissue and then let it soak into the connective tissue for several minutes. We do this through through these three principles. The first one is finding our edge. And finding our edge means we bring ourselves into a yoga posture. We go to the place where we feel a stopping point, where we just stop and we don't go anymore here. That's a different place for each one of us. We are starting to feel some resistance, some pressure, some traction. It's not injurious. It's just a stopping place. And it can be uncomfortable, but there's a difference between discomfort and pain. And one of the ideas about a yoga practice is to understand what's discomfort and what's pain here. Incidentally, if you're hanging here and this is uncomfortable here, then this is where you grab extra props like a couple of pillows, and you can use them there. So each of us has a different edge, and you're trying to find yours in this posture here. The second principle is called stillness. Once you've found the shape, the edge that works for your body, now you try to stay for a while. This takes patience. This takes fortitude. This takes endurance to be able to just stay for a while without getting up, in and up and out of the posture several times here. You can adjust things. Maybe a foot needs adjustment. Maybe some arms or hands. Maybe the head and the neck need adjustment. So you're allowed to do all of that here. Most of the emphasis in many of these postures are in the legs and the hips, maybe in the spine. Certainly that's what we're doing in half frog. We're internally rotating this hip socket. We're flexing the spine here if you folded forward. By the way, if the folding forward doesn't work for you, you don't have to fold forward here. So about 5 more breaths here. And this brings us to the final principle, the third principle, and that's time. So once you found your edge, once you found the patience to become still, then you stay for a period of time. So connective tissue, the plastic tissues like fascia, ligaments, bones, they like a very gentle, long-held traction. And that's the reason for the time. That's the reason for staying for a while. Muscle fiber likes engage and release, engage and release, engage and release. That's what the muscle fiber likes. But the connective tissue is a different tissue, and it needs a different type of exercise here. So just one more breath here. And then if you have folded forward, plant your hands, use your hands and your arms to slowly lift yourself up. If your spine is achy, maybe you want to do a slight back bend or some gentle twists to work out the stagnation there. And then you can lean back and release the left frog leg. Ho-ho. And then maybe work out the kinks of the frog by pointing and flexing your feet a few times, bobbing your knees up and down, rocking your legs back and forth. Maybe your torso needs some more movement here. And we'll go ahead and set up for the other side of frog here. Half frog here. So notice this whole time I've been sitting up on 2 blankets here. So lengthen out through your legs here. Now it's the right leg that bends and folds back. So the right heel's on the outside of the right hip. You can move the right knee out to the right. And maybe you discover this creates too much pain, so you want to do half butterfly instead. This is a good posture to do. The physical emphasis is different. You've gone from internal rotation to external rotation. If you can keep this left leg straight, keep it straight. If you need a little bend in it to keep it from getting painful, then put a blanket roll underneath that leg here. Grow up tall through your torso, and with a nice long torso hinge forward, kind of slightly over the left leg here. And then release the muscle fiber in your entire torso up through your head and your neck. Completely release everything. Let it round and soften until you completely stop. And then decide if you need extra. Maybe you need 1 or 2 extra pillows here to just kind of rest yourself on here. Otherwise, we'll set ourselves up for 3 more minutes on this side here. So going back to the 3 principles here, so we try to find our edge, and our edge is a place that's appropriate for our body. and it can be different for each one of us. We try to stay for a while. But that's the fourth element. So there's this three-dimensional element of making the physical posture in three-dimensional space. The fourth element is how much time we spend here. And the time is actually pretty arbitrary. So initially when you start a yin practice, you just stay here for as long as you can stand it. And maybe you can only stand it for a minute. I've got my stopwatch set for about 3 minutes or 3.5 minutes. And maybe that's too much, maybe that's too long. And so maybe try to stay for a minute, maybe try to stay for 2 minutes. But it's okay to come out when your body is telling you you're done. This is an internal practice, so you're paying a lot of attention to the sensations. We call this, you're feeling it, right? And that's what we mean by feel. When in yoga, a lot of times when we talk about our feelings, pay attention to your feelings, we're often talking about these physical sensations. Yeah, pay attention to your physical sensations. Know what they're up to. And if you do, it's going to be very rare that you actually injure yourself. Because when you notice that you're experiencing true pain, something that's causing injury, you're more likely to make an adjustment or come out of the posture here. Rather than if your mind is busy, you're in pain, but you're so distracted by what you're thinking about, you never come out, and at the end of the practice you've hurt yourself and you have no idea why, because you weren't paying attention here. Well, we'll pay attention. We've got 1 more minute on this side. If you're not feeling anything, relax your muscles, let yourself melt a little bit more. If you're feeling too much, then it is being a very wise and masterful yogi to back yourself off a little bit here. Maybe it's time to come out completely here. Otherwise, we have about 5 more slow breaths. You can use your normal natural breath to soften the places that are a little bit agitated here. And by agitated, I mean the muscles are toning to protect something, and maybe they need to protect it, or maybe we can soften and quiet them down with 1 or 2 more breaths of stillness here. And then when you're ready to come out, you'll plant your hands, use your hands and your arms to slowly bring yourself up. And then maybe start to remove some props off to the side, work out the kinks in your torso. Maybe slowly bring that right leg out in front, and a little bit of just rest or counterpose time before the next yin posture. We can do something yang, and today I'll suggest bridge pose as kind of a yang interlude before we go into the next yin posture. So for bridge pose, you bring yourself onto your back, bend your knees, put your feet on the ground about hip width apart. Bring your heels in as close enough to your heels so that you can touch your heels with your middle finger here. Head, neck, shoulders, all very comfortable on the floor. And then hands on either side of your torso, root through your feet, root through your arms and your shoulders. And then on your next inhale, slowly begin to lift your hips up towards the ceiling as far as they go until they don't go anymore. And then see if you can slowly lower them all the way down to the ground until they touch down. Maybe stay here for a resting breath. And then when you get to your next inhale again, use the inhale to help lift your hips. Don't worry about how high they go. You're just going as high as you can get them. And then gently, maybe on an exhale, lower them back down with control. So we'll do this 1 more time and we'll just stay for a bit. So on your next inhale, you'll gently lift your hips up. See if you can stay here for a while. This might be challenging. See if you can interlace your fingers behind your torso. Roll your shoulders underneath the back of your torso. And then through your shoulders and your feet, see if you can lift your hips up just even a little bit higher. You might have to tuck your chin to help not kink your neck here. Maybe hold for a breath. And then release your hands, untuck your shoulders, with control, lower your torso all the way down onto the ground. And then gently roll over to one side, bring yourself up to seated, and we'll get ourselves set up for the next Yin posture. The next Yin posture is known as half shoelace pose. So come back to seated, legs out in front, and sit up on some height if that feels more accessible for you. If you have a large range of motion, maybe you don't need to sit up on any height here. So half shoelace is another forward fold here. It's getting into the entire back side of the body here. So I'll demonstrate half shoelace here. So bend the left knee and stack the left knee on top of the right knee. Right leg straight here. So this is the beginning of half shoelace. If you're already feeling a lot here, stay here. If you need a little bit more, you begin to fold forward. If you're feeling too much here, like I am, in the bottom of that right leg, then get the handy prop to put under that right knee here. And then from here, you can gently fold forward. For some of us, this is way too much. This is actually creating injury in the back of this leg. So there is an alternative to half shoelace. And the alternative is hand to big toe pose here. And for that, you'll need some kind of thing, something that you can use as a strap here. So for that, find a towel or an old t-shirt. I actually have a yoga strap here. Lay on the floor. Both knees bent, feet on the floor, just like for bridge. Take the strap, bring your right knee in, wrap the strap around your right foot, extend your right leg straight. Grab the strap with both hands, extend the left leg towards the floor. Lower your torso, head, neck, shoulders back towards the ground, and very gently lift this leg up until you start feeling something in the back of this leg. Decide how much pressure you want to feel there. And then when you get to a goodly amount of pressure, that's where you stop. And then that's where you just hold this here. The nice thing about this is you can control how much pressure you want to feel here with however much you hold on to and pull on the strap. So that's a nice alternative. Otherwise, if half shoelace is working for you, then maybe stick with half shoelace here. So just a brief introduction to this concept known as antifragility. You know, it's a mouthful here. But we need to understand it to understand how we need to move our bodies, because antifragility is a state of living tissue. Now we need to maybe back up and best define antifragility by defining what the word fragile means and what the word robust means. So in order to define what fragile is, we take an inanimate object, something that's not living. It's made out of non-living material. And it's a sort of object that will break, will be destroyed under very little stress, very little pressure, very little impact force. So a good example of this is a fine china wine glass, a crystal glass, if you will, with very thin sides, like a wine glass, a long stem wine glass. So you have this very delicate crystal long stem wine glass and you drop it on the floor, it's going to shatter into hard pieces. In other words, just that little bit of stress from the impact is all it takes to completely injure, if you will, the very fine wine glass here. So we have two more breaths here in half shoelace here, which means we're about ready to come out when you do come out and you fold it forward, bring yourself all the way up. Lengthen out through your torso. So this is yang here. You got muscles engaged to make your torso long here. Reach back, you can undo your half shoelace. And then a little bit of wiggling around to work out some of the kinks. We'll do the other side of half shoelace when we're ready here. So left leg is straight now. Maybe straight is relative and you need that little bit of bend in the left knee. And then bend your right knee, wrap the right knee on top of the left knee. So the right heel's on the outside of the left heel here. And if this doesn't work for you, you can do the hand to big toe pose on this side with the strap. Otherwise, you can stay here, or you can start to fold forward. Again, find your stopping point. Again, if you're folding forward and you're finding that a little bit too desperate, then find some kind of padding, extra blankets or pillows. Place them underneath your torso here. And then we'll stay here for a few more minutes. So the next concept we want to explore is the opposite of fragile. So what we call robust. And you can think of a big piece of iron or steel. I'm thinking like an iron cannonball or a steel girder. Something that takes a lot of stress before it fails, before it breaks. Cannonball. If you drop a cannonball, it's not going to shatter at all. You drop a steel girder, it's not going to shatter. Very, very strong, very, very robust. It takes an intensely high amount of stress. There is a point to where a cannonball will break. There is a point to where a steel girder will break. But it takes a huge amount of force, huge amount of stress in order for those things to break, and that's why we call them robust. So fragile on one end, robust on another end. These are things that are non-living. However, there are some materials that are neither fragile or robust. They're known as antifragile. An antifragile material gets stronger with a light or an appropriate amount of stress. So initially, an antifragile material is fragile, but if you just appropriately stress it, start out with a small stress, then maybe a larger stress, rest it in between so that it can recover, it becomes stronger. Living tissue of all kinds are materials that are anti-fragile. So if a material is living, if it feels some stress, some pressure, an appropriate amount, not too much, but just enough to where it feels it, it senses it, and then you rest it, it will come back stronger. It will come back stronger. If you stress it too much, you will break it. If you don't stress it enough, it remains fragile. And we see this in our own living tissue. And this brings us to the next topic. And the next topic is known as the theory of exercise. The theory of exercise simply states that if you want a living tissue to become stronger, you have to stress it. Now, the complicated thing here is what is the appropriate stress and kind of stress and duration of stress and intensity of stress to make that tissue healthy. But it is the basis for exercise. We know this for a fact when we are thinking about muscle fiber, which is what most of us are familiar with. We're quite familiar with this posture here, so familiar with it that we can come out of it. So when you're ready, slowly bring yourself up. Maybe lean back on your hands and arms and slowly release. the right leg, make some movements here, and then we'll do a little bit of counter work. So we'll try some lateral bends. Come to a comfortable seat. I'm going to come back to cross-legged here. And then once you've found a seat, just a lateral blend flow before we get into the next Yin posture. So hands on either side of your torso. Big inhale up as you reach your arms all the way to the ceiling. Exhale and laterally bend over to the right side. So lower the right arm all the way to the ground. Reach up, up, up and over with the left arm. As you bend, try to keep this sits bones grounded. So we're bending rather than tilting here. And then bring yourself all the way back up. Right arm comes up, left arm comes down, root the left hand into the ground, reach up and over with the right arm. Steady and stabilize yourself with this left hand here. And then bring yourself back up. We'll do this a few more times, 2 or 3 more times to either side here. Just go at your own pace and don't worry about how deep you're going. Just worry about this slow movement back and forth here. Slowly bring yourself back up. Maybe both arms come up overhead. Reach up one last time and then bring your arms down. Next, Yin posture is known as half saddle pose. So watch the demo. The alternative will be Sphinx pose. So I'll demonstrate Sphinx after half saddle here. So maybe for half saddle, you need a construction for underneath your torso if and when you lean back here. So I'm going to take 2 pillows to make myself a little bit of height or padding here. And then take one of my blankets just to increase the padding on the pillows. And then if I want some padding underneath my knees or my legs, maybe another blanket here, just to place underneath here. And then for half saddle, come to seated, legs out in front here. Bend the right knee, bring the right heel on the outside of the right hip. Left leg is straight or slightly bent if it needs to. If this is enough, you stay here. If you need a little bit more height, maybe put some books underneath your hips here to create some height, to give this knee or this ankle a little bit of room. If the knee or the ankle are in an extreme amount of pain, then maybe half saddle is not the right posture for you. To finish off half saddle, if you wish, you start to lean back. However, go slowly and stop when you feel enough pressure somewhere. Maybe you make it all the way back onto the floor or onto some height like I'm doing with these pillows. Notice my knee popped up off the ground. This is okay as long as there's no pain there. Here. Left leg is soft. Right leg is soft, even though it's maybe pretty intense here. But if this is painful, this is essentially a back bend, particularly if you're on a little bit of height here. So if you think the back bend is more useful for you, you can always come into Sphinx, and I'll just remind you here what Sphinx is here. So you come onto your belly, bring your elbows underneath your shoulders, shoulder width apart. Come into this simple back bend, soften your spine, let your spine sag here. Head and neck can do whatever is most comfortable. You can hang, you can hold your head up. Here, you can adjust your elbows to minimize the muscle engagement in your arms. And then just hang out here in Sphinx. We'll do 2 rounds of Sphinx because there's 2 sides to half saddle. Otherwise, notice where you're at in half saddle. Notice if things are too much. Maybe you need to adjust your edge. Maybe you need to come out of saddle. Maybe you need to go a little bit deeper. Maybe you can get rid of a little bit of your height underneath here. Otherwise, a couple more minutes here. And we'll get back to this idea of what's called the theory of exercise. So it's fairly basic and easy to understand the fundamental idea of the theory of exercise. most of us in our modern Western culture understand what we need to do to make our muscles stronger. So muscle tissue, we want it to be stronger. We have to undertake some kind of movement activity that stresses the muscle fiber for a while. And the best way to stress muscle fiber is to engage and release, engage and release, engage and release, engage and release. Maybe if you're weightlifting, you do 3 reps of 10. Some kind of weightlifting where you stress the muscle fiber, then you release the muscle fiber. And then afterwards you rest, you go and do something else for a while, you sleep. And this cycle of exercising the muscle fiber makes the muscles stronger. However, when we are weightlifting, at the end of the weightlifting activities, our muscles might feel temporarily weaker. This is a little bit counterintuitive. So we walk out of the weight room thinking, oh man, I can't lift my own arm anymore. That doesn't make any sense because we're lifting weights to become stronger. Why is it that we're putting up with being weaker? Well, we know that being weak is a temporary sensation after some rest, maybe after some time. Then we know our muscle fiber, which is an anti-fragile tissue, is going to recover and come back healthier and stronger. Right? This is probably the easiest to understand here. So that is the theory of exercise. That's why exercise works. We realize that if we appropriately stress the tissues with some sort of exercise, they will come back healthier and stronger, as long as we don't overstress them and create injury or degradation here. So maybe just one more breath to stress the connective tissue running through this sacroiliac joint, running through the top of this thigh. And then when you're ready to come out of half saddle, if you've been here the entire time, the easiest way out is to gently roll away from the bent leg. So roll gently onto your left side until you can release the right leg. And then do a systems check here of that leg. Check out the joint motion here. So maybe flex the knee a little bit, maybe make ankle circles, maybe make hip circles here. And then when you feel that right leg is still working, invite yourself up to seated. Maybe spend some time here, counter pose time, to work out some other kinks. And then when you're ready, bring yourself into the other side of half saddle. And if you were doing Sphinx, you can stay in Sphinx, you can come out of Sphinx and then go back into Sphinx. Or you can try bringing the left heel back on the left side of the hip. Left knee is bent. And then decide if you need a little bit of height underneath your hips. Maybe you stay here, or maybe you can start to slowly bring yourself back. Maybe you rest yourself onto your arms, or maybe you make it all the way onto your back here. And then again, you're trying to soften the muscle fiber so that the traction is going into connective tissue. So again, my knee is floating, but I'm feeling no pain in that knee. And so I'm going to allow it to float so that my muscles can be soft here. And then we'll stay here for a little while longer. Since we understand the theory of exercise for muscle fiber, we just need to remind ourselves that the human body is a very complicated system of tissues. And it is not made up of just muscle fiber. It's made up of digestive organs, it's made up of nervous system and skin and all other kinds of substances, including connective tissue, including bone, including ligaments, including fascia. All of these plastic tissues need to be exercised too because they are anti-fragile tissues. They need to be exercised to be kept healthy. And they need to be stressed in an appropriate manner. However, since they're connective tissue, the way you exercise connective tissue is with long-held, soft, moderate traction. Thus, the reason for these long holds in this yin yoga practice is we're letting the muscle fiber be soft so that we can emphasize the type of exercise that connective tissue likes. Because if we keep the connective tissue as strong and healthy as the muscle fiber, then it is less likely we will injure ourselves from overdoing the muscles here. The connective tissue can keep up with the muscle fiber here. So about 5 or 6 more slow breaths here, if that's appropriate on this side of saddle. If you've had enough of saddle, you can start coming out. Otherwise, maybe a few more breaths here. So our body is alive. It's made up of living tissue that's anti-fragile. And in order to keep it healthy and strong and not fragile, we need to exercise it. The difficulty here is determining the correct or the appropriate exercise for our very unique body, which brings us to this last topic that I will briefly introduce, since any one of these topics is something that you could talk about for a year in yoga practice and never cover every detail of these topics, but it's good to actually be aware and to know of these things. So we're coming out of half saddle now. Slowly roll over onto your right side until you can release that left leg here. And then when you can release it, take some time to just give it some test, some light, gentle yang motion by testing out the joints, working out the stagnation. And then when you feel that that left leg is still operational, bring yourself up to seated. And then we'll move, we'll do a little bit of a yang counter pose, something that's actually a core strengthener. This is known as a forearm plank. So come to hands and knees. Maybe even have your knees on the pillows if you want to. Maybe feet off of the pillows here. And then from here, come down onto your forearms. And then tuck your toes under, root into solid floor. And then maybe lift up one knee, lift up the other knee, and then straighten out your body into a long plank here. And just stay here for 1 or 2 breaths or so, just to kind of lengthen out after that deep flexion in the knee here. And then you lower your knees back down and then come to seated. We'll try a prone twist next here. So if you have a pillow setup like I do, or if you don't, maybe you want to make a setup like this, or maybe you have a yoga bolster. Then you put the yoga bolster on the edge of your mat here. Start seated on the edge of your padding with legs out in front. Bend both knees, sweep your feet back so that they're comfortable. So knees are pointed perpendicular to the length of your padding. Grow up tall through your torso so that's easier to twist. And then turn and twist and face your padding with the front of your upper torso. And then use your hands and your arms to just kind of work yourself down onto the bolster. Experiment with turning your head away from your knees. And if that's too painful for your neck, turn your head the same direction as your knees. But once you finally get down and settled onto the pillows, then release your arms, let them be supported by the floor. Release your torso, let it be supported by the padding. Release your hips and your legs, let them be supported by the floor. And then just soften and settle here. So this is really a posture of surrender. You're surrendering your torso into the padding, you're surrendering your legs and your arms onto the floor so that either the floor or the padding is completely supporting you here, so that you can really release the muscle fiber. If something's uncomfortable to the point where your muscles need to tone, then keep rearranging things until you find something that does work for you here. And then come back to your breathing for a moment. Notice how your breath moves in and out of your torso. Notice if it's soft. Notice if it's short and choppy. There's really no criticism here of your breath. You're just allowing to be whatever it is here as you sink, soften, and settle. That way the muscle fiber can relax, and as it relaxes, you deepen into this twist. So we're getting into all the little faucet joints of the spine, all the ligaments that run along the spine with this twist. And there's a lot of tension there. There's a lot of tension in that spine, a lot of muscular tension, but also a lot of connective tissue tension. And this is actually a really deep twist when you allow yourself to completely settle into it. By the way, we're mostly interested in the twist in the main part of the torso. So if your head and neck ever get too strained, give yourself permission to adjust that. And just maintain the twist in the rest of the torso. So there's nothing sacred about having to keep your head and neck in exactly the same position. You can adjust that as you need to here. So we got 1 more minute on this side. So due to how nature works, every single one of us has a uniquely diverse body. In other words, the details of how our bodies are built are different. There might be some gross general properties that are the same. For example, most people have spines. Most people have some sort of muscular system that runs through their body, so you can consider that kind of a general property. But if you look at the details, if you look at the proportions, how things are interconnected, the details, the shapes, the proportions, the sizes, the lengths of all of these things are different between one person and another one. And in fact, the differences between individual people are much, much greater than the differences of a statistical group of people. Maybe the best example is that of any differences, statistical differences between all men and all women. The differences in how one man is constructed compared to another male is usually greater than the difference between how an average male is constructed and how an average female is constructed. This is, of course, known as human variation. There's a wide variety in the shapes of our bones. There's a wide variety in the formation of our muscles and how they connect to our bones. Everything is different about us, how our nervous system is distributed, how our digestive system is distributed. This is why we use things like our fingerprints and our retinal blood vessel eye scan as something individual. It's not only those things, there's so much other stuff in our bodies that are so unique to us that you could use it for identification. That has consequences. That has consequences in exercise. We're kind of done with this side here. So go ahead and slowly bring yourself up. Use your hands and your arms to do the work. And then maybe find your bearings here a little bit, but we'll do the other side of the twist. So for the other side of the twist, rearrange your padding or rearrange yourself. Maybe legs are lengthened out and then sweep them back so your knees are pointed away in the other direction. Grow up tall through your torso here. Turn and face your padding again with your upper torso, and then slowly inch yourself down onto the torso. Have that conversation with your head and your neck. Does it turn away from your knees? And if that's too painful, maybe it has to turn the same direction. Readjust your arms so that you can sink down onto the floor. Maybe you don't need any padding at all here. And then settle. Settle into this twist. Maybe this twist feels a little bit more dramatic because we just spent 4 minutes twisting on the other side. So we'll spend a few minutes on this side. Again, the emphasis is the spinal twist. In the thoracic spine and the lumbar spine. So if your neck, whatever position is in, gets uncomfortable,
Give yourself permission to move your head around. The consequences of human variation means that when we exercise our tissues, when we exercise our muscles, when we exercise our connective tissues, because the details of how our bones, muscles, and connective tissues run through our body, the healthiest movement we need to make is actually unique to us. So our exercise programs that we build for ourselves have to be unique for us. Our yoga postures, in the end, have to be adjusted for the way we are uniquely constructed. Which is why you start out in any kind of an exercise class or yoga class, maybe following the general instructions of the instructor. But at some point, you have to modify them for your own unique body. And you know when you need to modify, when you start experiencing pain or when you aren't feeling pressure. So this goes back to finding your edge. If you're moving in a way you think you're supposed to move and it's creating injury, then you need to find a new way to move for your body. If you're moving in a direction you think you need to move and you're feeling nothing, you need to find a different way. Here, this is the consequence. This is the consequence of human variation, is we start out with kind of assuming that we're kind of built like everybody else and we can move like everybody else. This works for a while, but at some point it's not going to work for you because your body's going to be different than the person's body that's telling you what to do. And what works for them will not work for you some of the time. And we need to acknowledge that. It makes our exercise regimens and our yoga practices so much more valuable when we realize that, oh, at this point, I kind of need to do this posture my own way because of my own unique manifestation, this body that I have here. So we have about 5 more slow breaths on this side. The best way to approach this is with an attitude of acceptance. It's like, wow, I get to move my body the way it's supposed to move, the way it was built to move. And that's the healthiest way that I can actually move. Just a few more breaths here. Yin yoga is actually a type of movement. It's just in this practice we move very, very slowly. And then maybe one more breath here. And then if you're ready to come out of this twist, give yourself permission to move slowly as you come out. And as you do come out of the posture, then maybe slowly begin to clear your mat of props. That was the last long-held yin posture. Just a little bit of integration before final resting pose, this pose known as Shavasana. Make your way onto your back. Bend your knees, put your feet on the floor here. And then take your right leg, bring your right knee into your torso, wrap your right thigh around your left thigh, just as high as it will go. And then draw both knees into your torso. So take your hands, use your hands, maybe grab your knees with each hand and pull your knees in. You can just stay here, or if you can reach up and grab the right foot with the left hand, left foot with the right hand, and then lower your torso back towards the ground and pull on your feet with your hands and your arms to draw your feet towards your shoulders, towards the floor, till everything kind of stops, till you're feeling some pressure. Maybe hold this for a breath or two. And then release, unwrap your legs, start all over again.
So feet on the floor. Now it's the left leg. Wrap the left thigh around the right thigh here. And then draw both knees in. You can use your hands for help here. You can just stay here and pull your knees in with your hands and hold this. Or if you can reach left foot with the right hand, right foot with the left hand, and again, just pull your feet in slowly down towards the ground, up towards your armpits until things stop and you're feeling some pressure somewhere. Notice that pressure, breathe into it. One more breath here. And then go ahead and release. Some final movement before this final resting posture can be free form, organic movement, just to work out any last kinks. And then slowly settle yourself down into your resting posture. It can be this traditional resting posture, which is really simply lying on the floor here. And if that's comfortable and accessible for you, you can do that. If not, make some adjustments. Maybe your head and neck are uncomfortable. And so you can always, if you have a pillow handy, put a pillow under your head. Maybe your low back is achy. If that's the case, sometimes bending your knees and placing a little bit of height underneath your knees is helpful. And then hands are released. Maybe arms are extended far enough from your waist so that your palms can rotate up towards the ceiling. Maybe this is still not comfortable for you. Then find a seated position. Do legs up the wall. Pick your favorite restorative posture. And then try that here. And then for this final posture, this is the ultimate Yin posture. This is the ultimate restorative posture. The idea here is to feel completely secure and stable and supported so that you can completely release all muscle toning. And you just bring yourself to an awareness of your breath in your torso. Maybe pay attention to the thoughts up in the brain. Begin to soften the muscles around your thoughts. And then maybe eventually your thoughts will soften. So eyes can be gently closed, jaw is released, forehead, temples, third eye is soft, the muscles around your ears are released. Eyes are sinking back into their sockets. You can feel the contact points. Each part of your body with the ground, the back of your head, back of your shoulders, down your arms. You can feel upper torso, your sacrum, your legs, your heels on the ground. Notice your breath again. Notice any residual sensations that might still be there. Some of you may even be able to notice your blood circulation. You can feel your own pulse. Or maybe you can feel a light tingling sensation. See if you can sense it in the tips of your fingers. Right fingers, left fingers. Maybe even down in your toes, so tips of your right toes and the tips of your left toes. Continue to use your breath, particularly the exhales, to soften and quiet muscle fiber. Continue to use your breath to soften and quiet your thoughts. If they drift away to the future and to the past, very gently draw them back to this moment and this breath. at some point, gently begin to deepen your breathing. You can make little motions with fingers and toes. And then make motion with arms, with legs. Maybe with head and with neck, you can start to just move around and bring more motion back into the rest of your body. When you're ready, gently bend both knees and roll yourself over onto one side. Pause there for just a breath or two, just long enough to give yourself a big thank you for your practice, but also a big thank you for you, your unique manifestation in the universe. The universe is ecstatically joyful that you are here. And then when you're ready, bring yourself up to seated. Once you come back to seated, find a comfortable seat. Feel the roots, the contacts with the ground, maybe nice long spine here. So I'll end the practice with an Om. You can either join in or just listen to my voice. So bring your hands together at heart center. The inner light in me honors the inner light in you. Namaste.